Good morning, Paola Jo from SederQuilts. I woke up this morning and it was finally cool. I've been wanting to bake some bread lately, but it's been too hot. But today, the weather forecast is a good chance of quilting, and cooking is optional. Optional cooking. I like options. One of the things that I like to do when I find a good recipe is I like to take a picture of it or a screenshot on my iPad. Even if I have an old recipe from mom or my grandma, I'll usually take a photo of it and then save it in my photo album under recipes, because then I can find it again. And anywhere I am, if I see a good recipe, I can take a photo of it with my phone and then transfer it there. So that's one of my little tips for nowadays keeping track of recipes. So anyway, I thought maybe we could do a few little videos on my type of cooking, sederizing it, with lots of options. I hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel, SederQuilts, or follow me on Facebook, SederQuilts. Yeah. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, put up your hair, and start a sink full of hot water, and grab an apron. I'll meet you back in just a moment. The first thing we're going to make is peasant bread. It is so simple and easy. I love it. You don't need any fancy ingredients, although you can add whatever you want for options, because I like options. So I like to either have my recipe printed out, and I like it in a plastic sheet so that I don't get splatters on it, or I like it on my iPad, and again I take a screenshot of it. I found this recipe for peasant bread from alexandracooks.com, or Alexandra's Kitchen. I can find it that way too. But if you look under Pinterest and you just look for peasant bread, this comes up. And she has wonderful tips and great photos and everything you need on there. But anyway, I like to have my recipe out so I can take a look at it. I actually make this bread often enough that I usually don't even have to look at the recipe, but it's very simple, easy ingredients. You probably have everything you need. You need flour. You can either use just plain old ordinary all-purpose flour, or you can use bread flour. I like Dakota made bread flour. I don't care what brand of all-purpose flour I get, but you need some kind of flour. I oftentimes use whole wheat flour, but only a little bit of it. I don't like too much of it, it gets too heavy. But yeah, flour. And you need some sugar. I usually like brown sugar because I think brown sugar has a little nicer flavor than just plain old white sugar, but you can use plain old white sugar. And some salt. I usually use kosher salt. If I sprinkle a little on the top, I like it's a little bigger, larger grain and whatnot. But yeah, you need some salt. You can use just plain old ordinary salt. And then you need some yeast, either a fast-acting quick rise or something that way. But I've tried it with about 3 different types of yeast, and they all seem to work well. But anyway, and then some butter, room temperature butter, and some water. That's all you need. It's so simple and easy. I like having a large measuring cup for the water, the wet things. You need a 1 cup measuring cup. You need a tablespoon, and you need a whisk and a spatula. You will be needing 2 oven bakeable Pyrex type bowls. The old ones are the best ones. You want them kind of small, about 1 liter or so. And you need 1 fairly square-walled metal bowl for mixing, and a cup of coffee, of course. Now, options. If you don't have Pyrex glass bowls this type, you might have something more this way. This is Pyrex, and it comes with a little plastic lid. This is very new. I have made the bread in this. That works well. Or if you have some of these old type Pyrexes, these all work well. The recipe calls for a more rounded baking dish, but all of these have worked. And actually, I've used just a regular bread pan too, a regular metal bread pan, and that works too. But options are available. So after I start my hot water in the sink with some soap, I turn on my tea kettle because I need some boiling hot water. And I turn on my oven for just a minute, just enough to warm it a little bit. I'm going to turn that off in just a moment. but I let it heat up just for a minute so that if it's too cool in the air, we can put the dough in there and it'll rise. But turn on your hot water to boil, turn on your oven for a moment, and make sure you've got your other stuff. So this is when I'm usually gathering all my ingredients, but I already have them out for you. And I take just a moment and then I turn off the oven again. And after it has just enough time to warm up a little bit, so about a minute usually is all I have that on, and then make sure you turn it off again because you don't want it to be too hot. When I first open up a package of flour and put it into my Tupperware container, I usually sift it originally, and then after that I don't sift it again. I just use a whisk to stir it up after that. But when I first put it in my container, I put it through this vintage sifter. And then that way I know I don't have any lumps and bumps in there. When I first buy my flour, I oftentimes put it in the freezer for at least a day. Back in the day, my grandmother would always do that in case there were any issues with it. It would kill any bugs that might be alive or things and whatnot. But we probably don't have to worry about that anymore, but I'm kind of old-fashioned and stuck in my ways. And so my grandma always said to put flour in the freezer first, so I always do that. I know, I still shake my milk containers too. And some of you are probably way too young to understand that too, but we used to get fresh milk on the farm, and yeah, we would shake our milk. But anyway, once I have this sifted the first time, and see how it just perfectly fits in that container? I love that. Once it has been sifted the first time, I don't sift it as I measure after that. It's just fine. But if I had already had this all ready, I would have just stirred it up a little bit with my whisk, and that works really, really well. So this peasant bread is so easy. It is quick and easy, very, very simple. You need 4 cups of flour. And I had just fluffed this flour with my whisk, stirred it up a little bit. We're going to stir it up a little bit more here in the pan, but 4 cups of flour. And then I usually make just a little bit of a hole in the middle there to add the other ingredients. And because we're going to be using perfectly lukewarm water here, we can just put the salt and the yeast in with the flour. It is so quick and easy. So we need about 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. So 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon. And so I'm going to do about 2/3 of a tablespoon. And the same amount of yeast. I'm going to use just slightly less than a tablespoon, about 2 teaspoons. There we go. And then I keep this right in my salt container because then it's always ready for me. And now we just stir this up a little bit, and this is just like sifting it. And that is ready to go for the water and sugar. And by the time I have the flour, salt, and yeast mixed up, I can usually hear my water starting to boil over here. So I know that that is hot. I can see the steam coming out of here. I can turn that off. I need about 2 cups of perfectly lukewarm water, just the right temperature for the yeast to activate. The best way to do this is to use 1.5 cups of cold water from the tap and 1/2 cup of boiling hot water. So we'll get about 1.5 cups of cold water, and then we add enough water to make just a little bit more than 2 cups, and then we add some brown sugar, and I have just the right size measuring cup in there all the time because I make this bread quite often. And then you just stir that till the sugar dissolves. Once the sugar is dissolved, we're going to pour it into the flour mixture and stir it up. It's going to be a soft dough, kind of watery. And that brown sugar just adds a nice little rich color. There's no kneading with this. You don't have to roll it out onto a floured counter and work it and whatnot. You just stir it up. It is so quick and easy. I just love this bread. So you just mix it, mix it, mix it a few times. Run the spatula around the outside edge. Stir it a little more. And it forms a dough. A nice soft dough. It's a very delicate bread dough. And yeah, that's perfect. Wasn't that quick and easy? Simple. Now I just dumped these other things in the sink of hot water, soapy water that I already have set up. And next we put some room temperature butter in the baking pans. We rub it around in there, and then we'll coat the wall of the pan that has the dough in it. And again, we're just gonna throw all of that stuff in the water right away with our clean hands, because I've been washing my hands over there in the sink after every step. We just smear this around, and you want plenty of butter on here. You don't want to be able to see through it. And this kind of fries the edge of the bread right away as it's baking and makes it so yummy. And you just smear that around. You don't want melted butter, and it doesn't work real well with cold butter. It needs to be kind of room temperature. And then it smears perfectly. And then I take some of the excess out of there and butter the edge of the bowl that the dough is in. Just spin it around, and then I just kind of tuck it under the dough a little bit here. And then because I don't like my hands all greasy and dirty, I go wash my hands, and then I wring out my towel in some hot water. Nice clean tea towel with hot, hot, hot water. And this is going to help the dough to rise. Heat and humidity are really good for baking bread. But if the weather is hot and humid, that's not good for me. So I like to bake on cool mornings, and I create the heat and humidity with the towel. You cover that up and you put it in the slightly warmed oven. It's not hot, it's just warm. And you let it sit in there for an hour or two until it comes up and raises the tea towel. So anyway, we'll see you back in an hour or so. And now while we have an hour or two to wait, I can quickly clean up my mess that I have so far, and that way I don't have a lot of mess at the end. And so I usually wash up a few dishes, throw away the things that I need to, and then that just makes it a little easier. I like to multitask. It's one of those option things. So I checked at about an hour. It was not quite ready. Oh yes, now it's ready. You can just see that the dough is rising enough that the tea towel is slightly puffed up there. And oh, that is just perfect. Now on to the next step. So once you've waited an hour and a half or two and the dough has doubled in size, now it's time to split it in half and make your 2 pans of bread. I almost always make one plain and one flavored bread. I usually like cinnamon and brown sugar, and that's always really, really yummy. If I'm making a homemade soup, I'll usually do a 12 spice bread, and that's really good. One of my other soups, I tend to mainly do just a little bit of a spicy, cheesy bread, but I like options. So there's all kinds of different things. If I'm making a chicken soup, I usually like dill and paprika. That's really good together. If I'm doing an Italian supper of some sort, I'm going to use oregano and dill and some garlic and things like that. I usually put a little bit of parsley in and some Parmesan sprinkled cheese. And then whether you want a salt or a non-salt deal for your onion and garlic, but whatever you like. Don't be afraid to experiment. You want a little bit of all of that, but you don't want too much and then you can't eat the bread. So experiment a little bit with that. But no matter what your options are for your seasonings, we're going to take 2 forks, preferably kind of small ones, and split it right down the middle. And now we had buttered the edge of the pan so it comes away from the edge of the pan pretty nicely and easily. And we're going to split that a little bit more, like the parting of the Red Sea. And then we're going to take half of it and put it in the cinnamon sugar pan over here. And then we're going to keep the other half for our other option, whether it's plain or seasoned bread. But I almost always make a little bit of cinnamon sugar bread because that's my favorite. And so I sprinkle a little bit on top, and then I kind of roll it. Now this is a very soft dough. It's not firm enough for you to knead it with your hands and whatnot. You just keep it in the pan, you sprinkle a little bit of stuff, and then you just kind of fold it onto itself. There you go, and then I put just a little bit of cinnamon sugar on the top so I can tell that that's that one. And then we go to the other one. And like I say, I could just do plain bread or I could do the spices. My hubby likes the plain bread, so I'm going to make plain today. But if the weekend stays kind of cold and rainy, I'm going to make some soup. And then I'll make another batch of this peasant bread, and I will put lots of spices on it. But this one's just going to be plain. So now I'm going to get my towel wet with hot water again, wring it out really well, cover both of these for about half an hour while I wait for the oven to warm up, and then we'll bake them. And we'll let them sit for about half an hour till they rise again. Okay, now that these are just about ready to go in the oven, I want to set my temperature for 400 to 425, depending on how your oven heats, but I usually go 400 on mine, and then we're going to let this raise for just a few minutes while that is heating up, and yeah, this will be ready to go in. It's 15 minutes at 400 or so, and then 15 minutes at 350, so it takes about a half hour to bake, and then they'll be perfect. Okay, now they're just perfect. You can see that the towel has risen up a little bit because they have risen nicely. They are ready to go in the oven. The oven is at 400 degrees. We'll put them in for 15 minutes. And then we'll drop the temperature to 350 for the final 15 minutes. Oh, yum! All right. And the bread is ready. Let's check this out. Ooh, yum. Always be careful when you open the door to get your face and your glasses out of the way. Oh, look at that. It is so pretty. Oh, and it smells so good. Oh, yum. The hardest part about making this bread is waiting for it to cool off a little bit so you can cut it and taste it. Turned off that, turned off that. Now we're going to just put a little bit of butter on the top. Yum. That way it makes the bread a little bit softer. I like soft crust. Some people like really dry, hard, crunchy crust. That's not my favorite though. Another trick is to put a moist towel over the top of the bread for just a little bit while it's starting to cool. After it has cooled most of the way, I sometimes put a cover over it. But if you put cover on too fast while it's still too hot, then you'll get soggy bread. But dump them out. And look at, with all that butter that was on the inside of the baking dish, oh, it just turned such a nice golden brown. You can see the brown sugar and the cinnamon. And we'll let that just cool a little bit, and then we'll pop them back in those. Oh, aren't they so pretty? So come on over for some coffee and bread. We'll see you later. Toodaloo.